This is Tonight with Jane Dutton. Tonight, is the EFF still relevant? The party wants to win big in next year's election, but does it have a chance? EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu is in the studio with us. Deadlines, hijacking and accidents. Checkpoint investigates if truckers can survive dangerous routes. And we're live in Bulawayo as ballots are counted in Zimbabwe. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton. The economic freedom fighters are gunning for the 2019 presidency, but will South Africans ever trust them to lead? Tonight, that's my question for EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu. What's yours? Tweet us with hashtag Tonight with Jane Dutton. We'll also open up our phone lines, but first, Nati has the latest news.
Thanks very much, Jane. Well, these are the top stories we're tracking for you this evening. Some South Africans are in the dark again. Eskom implemented stage 1 load shedding across the country this afternoon. It's expected to last for at least another 2 hours. The power giant has lost power in 15 units across 9 power stations. This has wiped 13% of power from the national grid. Officials are blaming the ongoing wage strike, depleting coal reserves and industrial unrest along the coal belt for the move. While petrol is set to go up again, this time by 1 cent per litre from midnight. Diesel will drop by 4 cents per litre and paraffin is up by 4 cents. But opposition parties and civil lobby groups are having none of it. The DA, accompanied by taxi associations and OUTA, marched to National Treasury's offices in Pretoria. They're demanding government bring the fuel levy down by 1 rand.
Fuel in South Africa is over 16 rands with further increases down the line. And 5 rand, 33 rands of that is calculated on a levy that government is in control of. We're asking for a 1 rand reduction, we're asking for a debate in Parliament, and we're asking ultimately that in fact the Road Accident Fund, which consumes much of the tax that comes out of, actually be in fact put under administration so that we can recoup that money. So ultimately, we are here on behalf of South Africans asking for a reduction in the fuel levy.
6.1 million South Africans are unemployed. Statistics South Africa's quarterly labour force survey says the unemployment rate has risen to 27.2% from April to June this year. That's almost half a percentage point from the first quarter. This translates to 102,000 jobs lost. Unemployment amongst the youth continues to increase and is now nearly 54%. The biggest unemployment losses were reported in manufacturing, services and trade industries. Stats SA says Black, Africans and colours remain the most vulnerable in the job market.
What we found that despite the fact that 98% of our businesses in South Africa's business community comprise micro, small and medium enterprises, formal, the employment in these firms is inversely proportional. So despite the 60% of small businesses estimate towards employment, what we're finding is that only 5.1% of people are formally employed in small firms, those employing below 10, 11% in those between 11 to 50, and only 12% in medium-sized firms up to 200 employees, which really comes to just over 28% of the formal employment in this country.
Well, the main opposition in Zimbabwe is accusing the country's electoral commission of deliberately delaying the results. The first results were set to be announced earlier this afternoon. Officials say over 50% of the votes have been counted, but presidential results may only be ready by Saturday. Both ZANU-PF and the opposition MDC are optimistic about victory. Unlike previous polls, this year's elections were peaceful. Well, those were the headlines. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you very much for that. Now, they've been called populist, socialist and a voice of the poor. Now their leader, Julius Malema, says he is ready to lead the country. But will the economic freedom fighters ever be able to truly compete against the ANC. Tonight, to answer that, is EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu. He'll also be answering your questions. Tweet them with a hashtag Tonight with Jane Dutton. Also, your phone lines, our phone lines are open. The number is 011-759-6340. Very good to have you with us, Floyd Shivambu. Thank you for coming in.
No, thanks for having us, yeah.
How relevant is the EFF right now?
Well, the EFF is the most relevant political party in South Africa since its formation 5 years ago. We've got to redefine the politics of South Africa in terms of the issues that get to be on the main agenda in parliament, in society as a whole. The whole country is currently speaking about the land question because of the EFF. The ruling party has even had to copy our resolutions because we're the most relevant political party in South Africa that determines the pace and the quality of debates that get to take place in parliament and everywhere in society. That is what basically has got to define the EFF. They were possibly the most relevant organization more than any other organization. For an organization that 5 years to have achieved what they've achieved thus far is quite a huge feat.
Yes, I mean, your rise has been quite extraordinary in the last 5 years, but I asked that question also because of the numbers that you have supporting you, and they don't really back up the confidence in the party. I mean, if we look at the municipal elections from 2014 to 2016, those are the latest we have, you only really went up 1 percentage point. What do you put the problem down to there?
Look, it was actually a 2 percentage point in terms of the correct reading of the differences between 2014 and 2016. But you must check that we are the only political party that grew in terms of the actual number of voters. The ANC in the same period lost 3 million voters. The DA in the same period lost 200,000 voters. And the EFF in the same period gained 100,000 voters to show that we are the most dynamic and the most relevant political party, that there's been illustrations of growth in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape, in Mpumalanga, in the Northern Cape and in the Western Cape as well. That illustrates that more and more South Africans are beginning to see that the EFF is the future of this country in terms of what we represent and what we stand for.
Is that your success, if you could put it down to the origins of your success, is the beginnings of Zuma's decline? I mean, is that where it all started? Is that where it all started going well for you? Without Zuma, you wouldn't be where you are today?
Look, you would know that when Jacob Zuma was the president of the ANC and of the country, we of course exposed the corruption around the entirety of the ANC under his leadership. And I hear people are saying that the EFF is becoming irrelevant because Jacob Zuma is no longer there.
But aren't they? I mean, he was the guy that you could take pot shots at. He was an easy victim, wasn't he?
It doesn't make any sense. We're debating the land question now. There's no Jacob Zuma. We're leading the debates. There's public hearings all over South Africa. There's no Jacob Zuma. But also from a scientific, statistical point of view, all the scientific polls had actually said when Jacob Zuma was the president that the EFF is going to get 4% of the vote if elections were to happen 8 months earlier. Now there are polls that have been released, and then they say that we're going to gain 7% of the vote. And Ramaphosa is the president of the ANC. So even when Ramaphosa is the president of the ANC and of the country, the EFF's relevance and might and growth is not being undermined by any of those developments. Because we're an independent organization that is growing independent of any other political party.
Okay, but you can't just be based on one issue, the land reform issue. I mean, there's got to be more to it than that.
It's more than that. The municipalities which never had an outright winner are beginning
to win any though.
Yes, well, which the EFF has got a far much bigger say, are beginning to insource workers, are beginning to open their clinics for 24 hours. And those are manifesto commitments of the economic freedom fighters. The students are beginning to demand much more family, fee-free education for the entirety of the post-secondary training and education space. And those are the battles, the founding principles and values of the EFF. It is not only about the land issue on all fronts. The EFF is at the forefront of what determines the agenda and content of what we're getting to deal with. But the issue that were irrelevant because of Ramaphosa, it's actually a lazy thinking and argument.
Well, some people, your critics or analysts, feel that you've been neutralized ever since Zuma left the presidency, and possibly because your numbers have plateaued, that the EFF is now resorting to race, looking towards race as something that might bolster its following?
I think that people would argue like that, maybe have not given themselves time to pay detailed attention to the policies and politics of the EFF.
Yeah, but they're listening to what's been said by you and Julius Malema.
Look, if you read the founding manifesto of the EFF, we said from the beginning that our struggle primarily seeks to liberate black people in general and Africans in particular. Consistently, the EFF has been saying that we want to undermine white supremacy and white privilege that has been bequeathed to our generation by colonialism, apartheid, and a mismanagement of the post-1994 project by the ANC. So there's never been any shift in terms of the policy articulations of the EFF.
So whites and
everything
now
else in
Indians,
terms
what
of
next?
No, like those are issues that we have highlighted. And by the way, in terms of how we got to then deal with the national question in South Africa, we're able to illustrate that we are not subjected to the same levels of suffering and underdevelopment in terms of what it is. Stats SA today issued the unemployment results. The levels of unemployment amongst the black Africans is far much more intense than it is for the colored population and the Indian population. And when you are dealing with a national question, you cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that the African majority were banished under apartheid, they were locked into Bantustans.
Nobody's denying it.
I'm
asking about the language that you are seeing more frequently within the EFF, and I'm just wondering how much support you have from your supporters. Can I just throw to something that you said a little earlier on to the Treasury Deputy Director General Ismail Momanyat?
Floyd, please, can we settle this offline then, please? Your attacks on him are unwarranted, really. There's no evidence.
The other issue which is of genuine political concern is that National Treasury is led by a Director General who is an African, and it looks like they are deliberate attempts to undermine African leadership in National Treasury. And and must raise it openly and publicly.
Point of order, please.
Yes.
What did you mean by that conversation?
I meant that Ismail Momoniat, the Deputy Director General, doesn't give any regard to African leadership in National Treasury. He thinks he has got some Indian superiority and he doesn't listen to the guidance of the leadership of National Treasury. He thinks he's some super administrator that must exist outside of the formal official structures of National Treasury. And that is a point that we have made and we're still making now. It's not racism. It is to actually identify racism, and identifying racism is not racist. It's to say that here is a person who doesn't respect African leadership. When Pravin Gordhan was the Minister of Finance, he used to treat him as a minister. But now you've got a minister, Ntlantla, and even when Malusi was there, even when there was Fiso as a deputy minister, and now the DG, Dondo Mohajan, this Momoniat has taken over National Treasury and he runs virtually everything on all issues that relate to National Treasury, from SARS to the PIC, to the FIC, the Reserve Bank. He's always interfering with all those issues without having to
that's a concern of the EFFs, isn't it? I mean, the problem with the Treasury is disrupting the EFF's money flow from Limpopo. Isn't that what's driving this anger towards him?
That is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. Which money flow from Limpopo? We do not have any.
We know that leadership, many of the members are benefiting from money coming from Limpopo, and that has been put down as one of the reasons. It's either that or the racist comments mean that the party is actually on its knees.
I think your back office didn't brief you properly. Which money flow from Limpopo? The EFF doesn't have any money flow
it's
from
got
Limpopo.
nothing to do.
I think that your back office here in ETV studios didn't educate you properly. Which money flow from Limpopo? From which department?
Yes.
From which entity which gave
Is this why that the EFF is so reluctant to give information about party donors as well? Does it fall under the same sort of umbrella?
Again, that is a radical misunderstanding.
I'm just asking you a question. This is out there. This is part of the public discourse. I'm putting it to you as a politician.
Now, again, in the founding manifesto and policies of the EFF, if you go and read the elections manifesto of the EFF in 2014, we're the only party that called for disclosure of party political funding, where it said that this must be disclosed. And we went to Parliament to argue very strongly that let us disclose where the sources of money come from for all political parties. There were, of course, some legislative technical issues that we dealt with, even in our official input in the National Council of Provinces, in the National Assembly. We made it categorically clear that no one must be given money outside of a defined territory, that all political parties must say who are their funders. And anyway, we ourselves have been open throughout in terms of what are the sources of our funding. We have never hidden any form of funding that we get as an organization, and every cent that we receive from Parliament, from the IEC, from the donations of public representatives of the EFF, we disclose and we illustrate where that money was expended. And by the way, in Parliament, what the best performing political party in terms of the cleanness of our books, in terms of what the AG says are the reporting mechanisms of all political parties. And that is a fact which many people tend to ignore because they want to pursue a narrow agenda that seeks to criminalize the EFF on things that it has got nothing to do about.
All right, let's leave it there. We're going to go for a break. State-owned enterprises are in a sorry state, so will the EFF's plan of putting land under state control ever work? When we come back, we'll have more with Floyd Shivambu and we'll take your calls.